So this is our second to final produce safety deep dive, and we are going to be talking about excluding wildlife from produce fields. We have Brandon Kaiser from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources fencing program, and he will be talking all about the fencing program, kind of material support, and also just how you can, some best practices to exclude wildlife. And then we will also hear from a farmer presenter, Moses Momani, who's going to talk about at his farm how he has installed fences and some of the best practices and tips that he's learned about fencing as well. Just a reminder, we have a larger than this food safety program at the University of Minnesota Extension that we're happy to engage with you on any questions that you have around things like fencing. Ariel and I are able to answer these questions and provide you with support however you need. So please reach out whenever you have questions around these types of things. So our last session will be in 2 weeks, and that's writing your farm's food safety plan. So I'm going to ask that participants bring their food safety plan that they've started, and we're going to work on it remotely as best we can. So if you are interested in that, please attend that one. So again, good agricultural practices, they're the things that we do, including excluding animals from our fields as best we can to do our best to minimize the risk of microbial contamination to produce. This topic specifically has a lot of other benefits outside of food safety. So of course, we would like to keep fecal contamination off of our produce and out of our produce fields because that can cause human illness. Also, of course, animals can do a great deal of damage to our produce and reduce our potential for profit. So there's kind of multiple goals here that we're talking about. So we've got fencing here. We've got a lot of types of fencing. We're going to try to kind of delve into some of these options today. Again, why are we worried about it? Animals can carry human pathogens, things like E. coli 0157H7, that's that pathogenic E. coli that can cause human illness. There have been outbreaks traced back to deer, particularly with E. coli, with pathogenic E. coli. So they can carry pathogens, human pathogens in their guts. Things like salmonella from avian species like birds, Listeria monocytogenes can be in all sorts of different wildlife fecal material. Also, you might have neighborhood cattle that try to get in, so potentially fencing could exclude those as well. Full exclusion probably is not possible, especially with species like deer or like birds, but we're going to do our best to minimize it for all of the reasons that we all know. Lots of different sorts of fencing. Hopefully none of us are using a little sign that says, sorry, no rabbit. That's probably not extremely successful, but there's lots of different options out here. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Moses is going to come up next, not right now, but we're going to have Brandon present his slides, and Ariel will kind of staff the chat. So as you have questions, please put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand and we will unmute you as well. And Star, while we're going, I'll just say, I see your question about the next webinar. So when you registered, you can say which ones you'd like to join. And if you clicked that one, you will be able to attend that one. So basically you just follow that same link and you can register for the next or for the one in 2 weeks. All right, thank you. It's yours, Brandon.
All right, so just double checking. Can you see everything?
Mhm. Yeah,
We're
it
good.
looks
You got the
great.
main screen? Perfect. Awesome. That's good. All right, so hi. As introduced, I'm Brandon Kaiser with the Minnesota DNR Wildlife Damage Program. So my program is a small statewide program that exists in that narrow space between wildlife damage and social tolerance. And so I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about some of the fencing stuff, but I'll kind of give you a little introduction to what our program does and kind of why we exist. Um, so when we think about human wildlife conflict, whether it's in the terms of damage or in terms of disease, um, agriculture is across all of Minnesota. We're at a time where agriculture is the highest quantity, highest quality, diversity all across the state. And it's, the impacts it has on wildlife and why we have such drastic wildlife damage is because of that increasing quality of our agriculture. When we think of agricultural damage, we think about it from a tolerance level. Everybody has their own variable tolerance level based off of social, economics, certainly tons of things that go into what determines a person's tolerance level. So you might be somebody who's okay with a little bit of wildlife here and there, maybe like seeing a couple of deer. But what happens is when that problem is left to exist, it crosses our social tolerance level, or a tolerance level, and becomes a problem, and it needs to be dealt with. So our program exists. Like I said, we're housed out of Brainerd, we're statewide, and we've been around for a little longer than 30 years. And our main goals are really to help identify wildlife damage concerns and propose solutions, provide abatement or exclusion designs and materials for commercial producers, and provide guidance on installation techniques on these materials. So how can we help you with your damage issues? Well, if you're a non-commercial person or just a private citizen, uh, we can help you with providing technical assistance. So we can certainly try to guide you in the right direction to set you up for success. If you're a commercial producer, we can do a little more than that. So we can provide technical assistance to provide guidance, but we can also potentially provide you material assistance in the form of fencing materials and potentially out of season removal permits. And so those final two ones that are for commercial producers only, that is by state statute. So those are written into statute, and we by law have to do this. So it's awesome for you as growers. So how to qualify for our program? So in order to get for a specialty grower, which encompasses a huge diversity of things that you may grow, we can provide you up to $5,000 in material assistance. And so you must hit three check marks in order to qualify. So you must sell at least $1,000 annually, which is in this day and age isn't terribly too much. You must have damage by a wildlife species confirmed by your local area wildlife staff. And then you must enter into a cooperative damage management agreement. And what that is it's an agreement between you and the state that you are doing your part to mitigate your damage. And by doing so, the state's going to help you with some materials, but also try to provide you guidance so that you can help protect your stuff down the road as well. So if you're interested in our program, a couple of ways to proceed. If you're just looking for technical assistance, let's say you don't qualify, you can just call the damage program, which I have contact information at the end of this talk. And so you can just give us a call, tell us what's going on, and we can try to give you some over the phone guidance. Um, if you're looking for the material assistance part of our program and you think you qualify, you'll have to call your local area wildlife manager. This is a map of all of the local areas in the state. This can be found on the DNR website, but certainly if you call me with the damage program, I can get you in touch with who you need to call. So when we think about mitigating wildlife damage, again, not just from the damage component, but from also keeping wildlife away from our agriculture, from a disease standpoint, there's a lot of tools we have in our toolbox. One of the lowest cost kind of first steps that suggest to people is non-lethal hazing. So there's a lot of different ways to non-lethally haze wildlife. Oftentimes, it's exploiting the sensory of wildlife. So visual, audio. Depending on the species, there's different things that can kind of trigger animal behavior to get them to not be comfortable. So birds, a really common one is propane cannons that explode or that make loud booms every so often. Some pyrotechnics, you can use guard dogs, animals that kind of try to keep other animals at bay. There's a whole kind of genre of non-lethal hazing that can be used. And if non-lethal hazing isn't working for your situation, the next kind of thing we talk to people about is psychological barriers. And so when you're thinking about fencing, there's a couple of different, there's psychological and physical. So psychological is something that an animal can figure out. After over time, an animal can learn to exploit this. So in the case of an energized fence, the top picture, if a bear were to get into your beehives, for instance, um, because your energized fence wasn't turned on, or a bear realizes I can knock this down really quick and then it's no longer painful, it becomes an obstacle that no longer works. And so we got to be careful when thinking about psychological barriers that can be breached, because over time they will be learned and then they won't work anymore. And so there's ways to keep these effective for longer, such as energized fences, keeping them hot all the time. That'll make sure that every time a bear or any other type of wildlife maybe touches it, interacts with it, they're always getting this reinforcement of the negative effect of the fence. And so there's ways to make physiological or psychological barriers effective long term, but they do take maintenance and can be learned. The alternative is physical barriers. These are typically going to be more expensive, but they're a longer term investment that do not require very much maintenance. And so this is certainly as close to set it and forget it as you can get, in terms of a permanent woven wire fence, or maybe some heavy duty panels. Um, so those are the types of non-lethal options that we can kind of suggest for folks. Um, if non-lethal options aren't working, there is the potential to give out of season removal permits or even extra in-season permits. And these are the types of things that will help kind of reduce your localized population issues. Um, so looking at a couple of specific examples, one of the biggest ones we deal with is deer. And so what we would recommend, or in some cases provide materials for, the kind of the gold standard is a 10-foot woven wire fence. This is a permanent solution that is a physical barrier. It is the most expensive, but it is something that'll last you 20 to 30 years. And it's 10 feet tall, so the deer won't be able to jump it. This is really kind of what a person should be aiming for if they're able to. If that's not a solution that works for you, other psychological barriers for deer, uh, such as heavy duty plastic fencing or energized fences, these are all going to require maintenance and possibly are short-term solutions. But people have had very effective situations with these, as long as they're able to uh, keep up with the maintenance, make sure that the fences aren't shorting out, patch holes when are needed. But those are the types of things that we can potentially suggest for deer. Another culprit that a lot of people deal with is raccoons in vegetable gardens. So one of the biggest things you can do with raccoons is put energized fencing up around your produce. And it really only needs to be about 2 strands, so it doesn't have to be a very tall fence, and just a little bit off the ground. And this can work really well to keep raccoons out, but also some other smaller species as well, potentially rabbits. Um, there are certain small mammals like this, like raccoons are a great example of an animal that you can remove lethally, without a permit. So they're considered a nuisance species that can be taken out. So trapping or any other legal means of removal. One of the ones we struggle with the most is birds. As was mentioned before, birds are very complicated because of their ability to fly. They're not an easy species to figure out, especially because there's a variety of them and how they interact with our produce. Some things that we found to be effective for folks is using like hail netting for maybe vineyards and orchards. Otherwise, as mentioned before, pyrotechnics, propane cannons. There are some natural ways you can kind of help enhance your environment to keep like songbirds out. Promoting natural perches for predator species such as hawks can be really helpful to keep songbirds out. However, knowing the situation, if you have chickens, that's going to be a negative thing. So, kind of knowing exactly what you're trying to protect, and how you're utilizing that protection method is going to be very important to make sure that you don't negatively impact another part of your operation. And then again, removal permits is something that is situation species specific, but it is something our program does offer. So if you're experiencing damage to your produce, your agriculture, um, what you should do is you should start by reporting this to your area wildlife office. So that map that I'd provided earlier, This establishes a record of damage and it kind of opens the conversation up for some technical guidance. It helps the managers determine the localized populations in your area, which helps them better manage the wildlife. And it yields technical assistance, so we can provide you with some guidance towards early assistance. Um, we stress to people that for our program, or whether you want materials from us or just guidance, reach out to us before you purchase material. One of the things we run into a lot with landowners is folks spending a lot of money on materials that quote unquote promise to keep deer out or keep turkey out. Oftentimes it's materials that are just being sold, and there's really no guarantee of it working. And so if you can call us, we can kind of hopefully help you guide through some of the ineffective methods and stop you from kind of wasting your time and money on things that are not effective. Certainly, people have found some very unique solutions to their problems with wildlife, but we can at least give you our perspective of what we believe will and will not work. It's important to know our program does not compensate or reimburse. And so any materials that you would get through our program, we do have to purchase. So just kind of understanding wildlife in your area and kind of what goes into managing wildlife. Hunting and trapping is one of our biggest tools for managing populations. So um, we definitely urge people to get into hunting and trapping. It's the best way to kind of curb your wildlife issues in your localized area, especially if you focus on harvesting females when legal. Females are going to be the heaviest contributors to our populations, and so if you have a heavy deer population, for instance, you would want to put some emphasis on harvesting antlerless deer. We also promote people using all of our available seasons. There's a variety of seasons to help remove wildlife, as well as using youth hunters. Youth hunters typically get a little extra special privileges for harvesting. And so, utilizing youth hunters can be a super effective way to help manage localized wildlife damage. And so with damage issues, one of the biggest thing we stress is deal with damage early. Non-lethal hazing can be super effective, but it's more effective if you use it early and often. As I mentioned before, 3 deer in your backyard or at your bird feeder in your garden, it might not be a problem to you, but if you let it go for too long, eventually it might be 100 deer, and then it becomes much harder to remove the problem. Um, if you're using deterrence, non-lethal hazing, we definitely recommend that you change up what you're using. Don't just use one option. Use tons of options and switch them around, move them around. Don't let wildlife get comfortable. So this should be you. So there's a lot of products out there that claim they're really effective at reducing wildlife damage. As I mentioned before, some things may say that it's for deer fencing, but it really might not be very effective. So just keep in mind that the wildlife damage program is a resource for you. If you're in the state of Minnesota, that's who we're here for. If you're outside of the state of Minnesota, I know there were some Wisconsin folks. I know Wisconsin has their own damage program that I definitely urge that you get in contact with. Um, but so that we are a resource and we're here to help you kind of help guide you through wildlife damage. And so we want to help you not waste money and time on things that we are pretty sure won't work, even if it says it's for deer fencing. Our goal is to help educate all of Minnesotans on wildlife damage and ways to prevent it, and hopefully we can increase your social tolerance while also reducing the hit that you take from wildlife, whether it be damage or disease from fecal. Um, and so lastly, we'd like to provide technical assistance to help you with those current damage issues and give you the tools so that you can help yourself down the road. So with that, this is my boss is at the top and then my contact info and my coworkers. So feel free to reach out with any questions. I try to be as available as I can. Oftentimes, we need to know quite a bit about your situation to give you really good guidance. But we definitely would love to help you out.
Thank you so much, Brandon. So we had a couple questions here. The first one was for that $1,000 limit. or the lower threshold for qualifying for the fencing materials, does
Hmm.
that need to be $1,000 in actual sales, or if somebody's done $1,000 of, say, donations, if they're a nonprofit farm, does that count?
So our program definitely has some gray line guidance. It is supposed to be sales. The program is supposed to be for commercial producers. However, we have worked with people in the past that we can kind of, on a case by case basis, we can try to work and figure out a way for you to fit our qualifications if that helps a little bit. Typically, nonprofit would not qualify for our program. But we have helped nonprofits that also had a little bit of a side business as well. So we can try to find a way for you to fit into our demands, I guess.
Got it. Okay, and I assume folks can reach out to you with those kind of tricky
Ab-
questions about the
yes,
program.
absolutely. We might direct you to your area wildlife manager. And it's not a way to pass you off to somebody else, but it's because your local area manager is really going to be the one that makes that call. And so that's typically what we'll do. And back to the $1,000, it is $1,000 just in total, and we really don't check that. It's more or less a guideline to make sure that the people we're helping are truly commercial and not just somebody that has their own personal garden.
Got it. Great. Okay, and then we got two other questions here. The first is if people are using some of those nuisance measures, like the cannons, for example, do they need permits, some kind of noise permits or other permits for using those measures?
So things like pyrotechnics or propane cannons, so you don't typically need a permit for them. However, the biggest thing that I will say, we have no control over the cities or ordinances. And so if you're within city limits, I would always urge you to contact your local kind of local government unit. Mostly because even if you are allowed to do it, just starting that conversation before you start doing it will go miles in terms of a good relationship with the city. And they're going to likely be more apt to you kind of solving your wildlife issues. But certainly every city has their own kind of individual ordinances. So I would urge you to check with those.
Great. And then last question here. If folks do receive kind of off-season tags for hunting deer on their property, but they don't hunt themselves, is DNR able to connect them with other hunters, or does DNR have a list of people who are interested in hunting on those properties?
So we don't actually have a kind of an active list of folks that it would be a great idea, and I know it's been talked about having a list of hunters that are looking for places to hunt and pairing them with people who are looking for hunters. So we don't have the resources to pair people up in that sense. However, if you talk to your local area manager about that, there might be more of a localized effort for that. So your area manager might have kind of uh, a backdoor knowledge of some folks that are looking for hunting locations, and so they might be able to pair you up, but I can't promise that.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Annalisa, I think, are we going to move over to Moses's presentation now?
Yeah, yeah, unless anybody else has questions for Brandon.
All right. Well, I'll keep track if anybody does, feel free to throw them in the chat and we can ask them at the end of the presentations here.
Yeah. And in terms of the links that Brandon was talking about how to connect with the DNR offices, I will make sure that we connect we'll send out a Google Doc with links and we'll make sure that that link is in there. Brandon, would you mind stop sharing? Thank you.
Nice, perfect.
So Moses, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Moses Mamanye. I'm a farmer, owner operator. Have a farm in Cambridge, um, 20 acres. We grow with my family on 3 to 5 acres at a time. Yeah, and then we also work with other beginning farmers as mentors. through Kilimo, Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. So if it's okay, I can share your PowerPoint. We'll recognize it. And there we go. And then I will just kind of listen and advance the slide as needed, if that's okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, so I'll share just my, personal experience with the fencing. Yeah, so for a while before we bought the Cambridge farm, we were renting, and then we bought the farm in Cambridge in 2014. So after 2014, after we bought the property, we encountered challenges with the deer. At some point, we had this terrible experience where, we had produce almost ready, and deer had favorite crops that they wanted. So peas, nice, ready to harvest, and then a few days before harvesting, that's when they decide to eat it. And that was the same with maybe Swiss chard. They like peas and Swiss chard, and so um, that made us go to the local DNR office in Cambridge, and we did exactly, or we went through the same steps that Brandon has been laying out, where we were to show the damage. So somebody came out to the field and looked and, confirmed that these are the deer that were eating your crop. And then, so they enrolled us into the program so we could put that fence, the first picture you saw. So this one, but because it was going to take a while, so two things happened. First, we were to be able to raise that other 5,000. And in order to fence the whole 20 acres, we needed around 10,000 by then. I think the roll that is 330 feet long was about 350 or something. Now I think it's way up there, maybe, I don't know, 600. And then we needed so many posts. But the good thing is they calculated all that. They told us how many posts we needed, how many rolls, and what the exact total cost was going to be. And they also, I think they asked us to give them the money, and they bought all these materials. We didn't buy anything. They just brought all that materials and put it on the farm. The only thing, again, we were to come up with was find somebody to put up a fence. So I had a tractor, and they had materials that if you wanted to do on your own, you could do. So I said, yeah, I'll do it on my own. So this is my friend, and I think the person there digging the hole with the hand is me. The front one, and then the other one is a friend who is helping. So we said we'll do it ourselves, or I said I will do it myself. And I got the material. It's a bar that you just hook it to the woven wire, and you back up as it unrolls with the tractor initially, and then it straightens it up, and then you can go in and just nail it. But initially I thought I would just dig these holes, and then they turned out to be, I don't know how many, and we dug a few, and then it didn't work, like it was taking forever. So we ended up getting a postal digger and attaching behind the tractor, and then boom, it went so fast. So I did the fence myself mostly. I had a few people come and help to finish it up, and that was that part. Yeah, so that is the part for the DNR. They really helped through the process. But before the material came, between the time somebody came to look at what the damage was and when the material came, they allowed me to they gave me some like tickets to shoot. I think they gave me 6. So it wasn't enough. I was able to use those. And they, I wanted to eat the deer, but they said, no, you can't eat. You have to give it away. So you have to have somebody come and get the deer as soon as you shoot it. Yeah, so that was that part. You can go to the next. Thank you. So apart from the deer, like keeping out the deer, we also we had other pests. So this woven wire, was like tighter to the bottom and wider to the top. This is not the one. This is actually somewhere else, but I just put the picture there. The one we put was that 8 foot high. But the reason we wanted to put the fence was to keep out the deer, someday to keep in the the animals that we were hoping to raise. We did raise a few animals after that, and that fence kept in the animals. We had experience while renting in other places of people just driving snowmobiles on our like prepared land where we had garlic on, even driving a 4-wheeler through. So so that having the fence was just giving us a sense of security of things that we have for our vegetables because we leave some things in the field during the winter and you know stuff like that. Yeah. You can go next. Yeah. So the fence that we put was the wire, woven wire, a little like smaller, smaller openings at the bottom and wider as they go up, with the hope that it will keep the smaller animals out. Yeah, still I would see animals that I didn't even recognize, like those critters. I don't know. Yeah, there are many out here. And we wanted to be organic certified, so we wanted to keep out as many different critters as possible out of the garden. So um, it almost meant that we needed to go back and put like a more tighter, like chicken netting or electric, netting to where we were actually growing the vegetables, because rabbits were still going through and small other animals. And we did try electric fencing also. Uh, 1 wire, 2 wires. It seemed not to work well for us. I don't know, well, it seemed like we needed more like experience in putting that up. So I think what has worked well for us is just the woven wire to keep out the deer, because we have not had any problem since we put that. Next. Yeah, here I put just a picture because we have also done other different things, especially even with the farmers that we are mentoring. We have had the T-post and the bird netting or stuff like that to try and use it for deer, to keep out deer. It doesn't work really well. And the reason why we do this is, there's no money, there's no 10,000 to put round on the fence, but also it's because we are renting the land and we can't, invest that amount of money on land that is rented. So, but and again, when we try to use this bird netting and other things that we think are 8 feet up, it becomes a lot of work. So the lower the cost, it appears to me, the higher the amount of labor that you need to do it. So, but that bad netting or other smaller type of fencing, we have tried to use that to keep out rabbits. The only other things that we have been unable to keep out are the gophers and those little squirrels. So next. Yeah, and just here is that strand there is the white strand is like electric fence to keep animals in, you know. This is just a picture I took at another farm that we were renting, and they were doing pigs. But then even these ones, they had that woven wire. And I've even seen in my farm in Cambridge that, for those wild animals, if they wanted to come in, they will try to burrow through under the fence. The fence I didn't go deeper, like I've written here, that you need to like put something going deeper so that as they try to burrow, they can't go through. One year I had, I don't know if it was a phone or the big door, but one year I had the phone inside through the woven wire, and when I went to check, they had actually like pushed and squeezed that woven wire and were able to go through. So I didn't know if it was trapped and forced itself or if it just decided to push through. There's another year I saw the like male deer just run so fast. I think it was a mating season and they were going like a speed I'd never seen before, and they would just jump over that 8-foot fence and go. But their goal, I think it wasn't to be inside my fence, but I think they were going somewhere. But that wasn't something that stopped them. They jumped over like nothing, and they just kept going. And I was like, wow. I have not had any weather damage. I've used untreated wood because I was certified organic, and I wondered how long that would last. Since 2016, I think it has. I've not done any maintenance so far on the you know on my fence, so I feel like it's doing good. Have I used pallets and other stuff? No, I just use that. Yeah, just fencing, animals, like making their pen or something, but not really like the farm fence. I've driven around and I've seen somebody who has made a whole pallet, a whole fence on one side. Okay, you can go. Oh, yeah, that's not me. But yeah, so I feel like for vegetable farmers, fencing is really important because deer is everywhere. I don't remember where there's no deer in Minnesota. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. Does anybody have questions they want to ask, or they can throw them in the chat here? Maybe while they're thinking about it, Moses, could you talk a little bit from a vegetable grower perspective about which crops you found are most susceptible to deer damage and which crops, maybe if you don't have a fence, you just don't want to be growing because they'll get eaten?
Yeah, it's like I mentioned peas, I mentioned Swiss chard. Those are the two that I've seen. Beans, green beans, they can eat that. Um, you know, they don't, I've never seen them eat potatoes. But you know, deer is like goat. Well, it's a goat. They will eat any leafy thing. Because in their natural environment, they just have to pick different things on the way. What I noticed with the deer, even before we fenced, is they were using one path. Uh, they were showing up around the same time and using that same path. So if they end up discovering this, then they will keep coming back and eating and eating and eating and eating and making it go down. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Moses. We had a question from Star here. Have you had much raccoon and or rabbit damage, and did you find an effective fencing method to deal with either of those pests?
Yeah, the advice I got when raccoons were eating all the sweet corn I tried to grow was maybe an electrical strand will work for them, or chicken netting fencing. So the cheaper one in my farm would be I would hook that energizer by the house, and then I'll just run a strand all the way out to the field, and then I'll just circle it. Uh, that proved to be very cheap, like less than maybe 200. I don't know how, or even less than 100, you can do that. For rabbits, yeah, they can be a damage because for the bigger leaves, they are not so much a big damage. I've watched rabbits and I see them, they like to eat grass. They will go nibble on leaves because they will cut one leaf and eat that and finish, compared to the others that maybe will just um, be, yeah, picking and, just destroying everything. Um, but all in all, rabbits are not also easy. I've tried just to shoot them, but they are not easy to control because they can proliferate, within a very short time. And actually, the little ones are the ones that will do a lot of damage. Um, yeah, so I've not had success getting rid of rabbits and gophers. Yeah.
And then we had a question about, could you speak about what the process was like for working with DNR? And do you have any tips for farmers about like how long it took to get everything figured out and how to approach them?
Yeah, just call and say I have a deer problem. Well, there has to be evidence of that they have eaten. For the fence is to keep out the wildlife. So you say, I want a fence to keep out the deer that are damaging my crop. Then somebody will come out. They will say, I'll come out when there's that damage, and then they'll take pictures. But even before they come out, they will want you to take those pictures and send it to them. And it has to be a crop. Yeah, so you can't show them a picture of they're eating something else close to what you have. It sounded to me like that was going to take more than a season, because uh if you have a crop during the growing season, and that's when you have to initiate this, then somebody has to come out. They came out within a week. They took the pictures, and then they will tell you, now we will do the processing. For me, by the end of that summer, that's when I had that done. It will take that growing summer, because in that picture you see, we started doing the fencing during the fall and the winter for the following year. But they have to come out and see the actual thing. So you can't send them pictures off season when they are not seeing it.
Moses, I know you mentioned, did you got tags to shoot 6 deer? Was that what you said?
Yes,
Do
6 or 7, yeah.
yeah, I'm curious, did you ask for more tags and they said you couldn't have them, or what was the process of trying to be able to shoot more?
That was interesting, because yeah, they gave me those, and to shoot the deer I had to wake up 4 in the morning, and I felt like this is crazy, waking up 4 in the morning so I can, like 6 when their deer is coming out to eat. That's when I'm going to shoot. and um, I I don't think I shot any, to be honest. I didn't. Because just by the presence of being there, I ended up disrupting their circle and all that. And by shooting once and missing, I think I shot three times missing. Then that they ended up not coming.
Yeah.
So I ended up not having to like because when you shoot at the same time you have to let them know right away so that carcass can be like given to somebody else or something. Like you have to prove that you didn't keep that carcass, stuff like that. Yeah.
Brandon, would you mind speaking towards that? So for people that don't know me, I was a longtime farmer in Wisconsin, and so it's a different process, but I remember we got a lot more than 6 tags too. It was kind of like once you shot all the deer, you're able to get more.
Mhm.
Brandon, can you speak towards what the process is for getting the tags and how DNR determines how many you get?
Yeah. So for the permits, typically the permits are for either folks with row crops where maybe fencing isn't really either a possibility or it's not really practical to expect that. Or if you're waiting for fencing, like Moses was saying, it kind of took a full growing season to get the material assistance going. And so while you're waiting, we can get you removal permits. Area staff are the ones that give those out, and they determine kind of based on your situation how many you would get. Typically, a person won't get more than 10. If you do have heavy deer pressure and you do fill all 10 of those, you can go to your area manager and say, hey, I did this. There's still a problem. And they can maybe get you a permit for more. A lot of times people don't end up using the permits. And if they do, they only take maybe a few deer. And part of it is just because a lot of times when deer are the problem, in certain types of times of year, deer are causing more damage than others. And the removal permits in the middle of the summer oftentimes are not super effective because it takes a lot of time. And I'm sure, as most of you know, as a grower, you don't have tons of time to just sit out there and wait for kind of the problem deer to happen. And so you get the permits through the area staff, and it's depending on how many deer are coming in and what your deer pressure is how they determine how many to give you.
Great. Thank you. I just want to read off here a question in the chat. Star asks, is deer scat in a production field helpful? And it sounds like it can be, but it's again going to be up to the area wildlife staff to determine if that counts as damage, essentially. All right. Do we have other questions? Anything else here folks are wondering about?
I'd be interested in knowing, Moses, and then maybe our participants can also chime in and say, before you were able to invest in a more expensive fence with the help of the DNR support, what other lower cost strategies did work? I know that Brandon said there's a lot that don't, so I was thinking it might be helpful for you to just say maybe what did work and then also what didn't work.
Just disrupting that pattern was one that we tried. So early in the morning or late in the evening. The other one we tried was throwing on like a row cover to cover those, especially if they were like younger plants, because they would come and nibble the top. What else did we try? We tried deer repellent, rabbit coyote thing, coyote pee or stuff like that. We tried all that. And they were not that effective. Eh, you know, yeah, so most of the time we were just hoping for the best, I would say, because yeah, we didn't have much money and we just knew that, just having a fence and keeping them out was the best way. And then for the other pests like rabbits and uh, gophers and I don't know, this that run on the grass. That's what I mean. The pocket gophers. Um, we we were to have maybe a dog, or that those were the options. But then organic certification, then that doesn't work well with that. So we just yeah. So there's always that trying to find that balance, and we chose not to have dogs to help us with that.
Thanks, Moses. One thing, just to be clear, is that you can, I mean, from a food safety perspective, and I think from organic, you can have a dog on the farm. The issue for food safety is when the dog or any animal is in the production fields. So I just want to be clear. I don't want people to think that you can't ever have a dog on the farm if you want to be certified organic or have good
Mm.
food safety, right?
So you could use the chicken, like the smaller, lower fencing to keep out the dog.
Yeah, yep. Or
Um,
train it or put it inside if it's not listening.
Yeah.
uh, Dylan is asking in the chat here if you all could just go over again the fence height recommendations for keeping different animals out.
Yeah, so we have different kind of recommendations. Obviously, it's very species dependent. And so for deer is one of our biggest ones. 10 feet is what we say is a good standard. There's a lot of people around the state that get away with 8 foot. From the state's perspective, if we're providing materials, we do require that it is 10 feet just because we know that will work. Although going back to what I was talking about in my talk was social tolerance. If you feel that 8 feet is good for you, and maybe once every couple of years a deer figures out that 8 feet is jumpable, and that's okay for you, then by all means 8 feet might work for you. We just recommend what we know will work to keep everything out. So for deer, it's 10 foot. For things like rabbits, it would be yeah, just like a couple foot high chicken wire. Otherwise, certain critters like raccoons that can climb, you're looking at more wanting to use energize to stop them from getting off the ground, essentially.
Brandon, do you think you could speak to some of the mistakes that you've seen people make in terms of putting up, something if they're trying to spend less money, like the ones that are just primarily for like snow fences and those kind of things?
Yeah. So some of the ones that some folks we've worked with and kind of seen some of the situations that have, I mean, honestly, some of them break our heart a little bit because it's money that's spent on things that don't work that could have gone towards the permanent fence. And so it's just trying to dissuade people from using that stuff. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to talk poorly about products that are available. We're not trying to um, bash anybody's product that's out there, but there are things like plastic netting that, again, situations may call for it. Like Moses was saying, if you're on rented land or a situation where a permanent fence isn't possible, you got to do the best you can with the situation you have. However, knowing your expectations or having expectations going into that will help a lot because plastic fencing can work short term. And if it's around an area where maybe you and your workers are out there all the time and there's a lot of kind of just activity going on, deer might not test it as much. But in certain areas, they might figure out plastic fencing is very easy to chew through or cut through very quickly. And then it's effectively, worthless. So it's really just anything that's plastic, anything that's, arguably just cheaper options are typically just not going to hold up through. If you leave it out all year round, the cold is going to make it brittle and probably break. Young fawns for deer, they have really sharp hooves, so they cut through things like plastic extremely quick. Energized fencing is something we see a lot of mistakes with because spacing is so important. So spacing is important because of how the animal will interact with the fence. For instance, bears is a great example. If you have spacing that's, let's say, 12-inch spacing, a bear might get zapped as they poke their head through that spacing. They might get zapped at the back of their head, which is going to push them forward and run through your fence. And once your fence is down, it's game over. But if you have tighter spacing, the bear will get zapped on the front part of its face, which will get it to back up. And that's how it respects the fence and leaves. And so understanding that spacing is super critical for what species you're trying to keep out. And then on top of energized, not just spacing, but also voltage. So if you don't have adequate voltage, we always tell people for bears and deer, it's like 4,000 to 5,000 is a really good output. So if you don't have a strong enough output, it's not going to zap the animal good enough. And in some cases, the reason we say 4,000 to 5,000 is because if you're dealing with maybe a dry spell where for a week we haven't had rain, the animal's not going to be grounded very well, so that zap isn't going to be quite as effective. And so we try to tell people that 4 to 5 should account for if you have some periods of dry weather. However, everything with energized fencing comes down to grounding. So if you're not getting enough voltage, some people think it's the energizer that's not big enough. Oftentimes it's that your grounding rods or your grounding is just not good enough or it's too dry. And so that's something we certainly would love to work with people on trying to help address what the issue is and why your fence maybe isn't effective. And try to help you kind of beef up and get the most out of that. But energized stuff is something that a lot of times people will put up and then leave it. And that's a kind of a big no-no because if you're not checking on your fence, making sure it's hot all the time, wildlife have nothing but time. So whether it's during the daytime when you're not there or at night, they're testing your fence all the time. So if your fence isn't hot all the time or it doesn't produce enough juice, they will figure that out. And once they get through, it's a psychological barrier. Now they know I can get through this.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Can you tell me one more thing about energized fencing, just in general? When would a grower decide to use energized versus not? Like, what are some of the factors?
So Energize is going to be something that you can move and take down. So certainly on things like rented land, things where maybe you don't need year-long protection or yeah, certainly it's more of that modular kind of situation, a situation where you'd be looking to maybe move like if it's around beehives, maybe it's because you move your beehives in different locations every year. Anything that's going to be non-permanent could be effective, but it's also going to be species dependent again. So I know people use energized fences for deer. One of the biggest problems with that is that the fences uh they can jump, right? So deer, if you have a 5-foot energized fence, they'll just jump over it. They will figure it out. And if you go higher than that, eventually what happens is if a deer tries to jump, let's say an 8-foot energized fence, if they touch the fence when they're in the air, it's not going to zap them because they're not grounded. And so for deer, we really don't recommend energized fencing because there's just too many ways for it to not work. Um, it's great for raccoons because again, they can climb. So we really are trying to keep them from climbing up on a physical barrier. And it's definitely soil dependent. So if you have soil that you can rely on it, like I said, with the grounding, it'll be more effective. But if you're in a situation where maybe your grounding's really poor, maybe if you're using a solar powered one, and you have too much shade and you're not going to be able to keep it fully charged all the time, those are all little kind of things that will lead to failure with fences or energized fences.
Great. Thank you. Are there any more questions out there? All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Brandon and Moses, for coming to present. I really appreciate it. I can speak firsthand as a farmer that fencing is both super important and also feels a little impenetrable sometimes. So I really appreciate having both of you here to talk about it and provide some expertise.
And Brandon, we'll make sure to include in the follow-up email to folks the DNR, well, actually just send me anything you'd like to send to people, including the link to the local offices, because it sounds like that's really kind of like the front door into the program is that you go through them.
Yeah, for sure. And we also have a handbook for kind of a walkthrough of how to build your own woven wire fence. And so it goes through all the installation of putting posts in the ground, everything that Moses was talking about. Um, Again, the program works for producers that are commercial producers. However, we have had a lot of people that don't want our money. They just want us to show them how to build a fence correctly. And so we can certainly work with those folks. So if you don't qualify for the financial help, we can certainly still spec you out a fence that works for your operation and set you forth to help yourself.
That's excellent. And that's at no charge as well for growers?
Correct, correct. And so it's we do have to prioritize the people who qualify for the program, but as we have time, we certainly would love to help you because that that's a side backdoor way of helping you if you don't qualify.
That's really helpful. And can you come out to the farm or would that just be over the phone?
We'd probably start with over the phone. And a lot can be done with aerial imagery and stuff, so we can get pretty good estimates, especially if the ground is flat, just by talking over the phone and using Google Earth. However, we are all over the state all the time, so we have found ways to, um, you know, we're already in the area. What's maybe since we're down here, we'll come and do a site visit. So we'll find ways to make it work.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah.
Moses, do you have any last thoughts or questions or anything?
No, I don't have any other questions or thoughts. Yeah, I'm happy to, I don't know, work with the farmer, with ideas, on how if they are putting their fence. Yeah, I'm not an expert, but like I said, I I learned some things that I would have done differently um, once the fence was done. Yeah, thanks. So.
Okay, thanks for sharing your expertise, Moses. It is very helpful. All right, thank you all for joining. After you've taken the poll, feel free to head out, and then we will be sending out the recording to this as well as the links to access the DNR program here shortly. Lauren has also made the other recordings. If you've attended the other sessions, we're going to send out a link so you can find them all in one playlist. So I'd like to really thank Brandon and Moses today for your time. It's extremely helpful. Brandon, we forgot to say how long the wait list is right now, but you said it's not a crazy wait list.
Yeah, so currently we are at what we're considering a no wait list. So we do have people on our list that from this past winter or in the last fall that we are currently working to set site visits up. But previous years we've had like a 4 or 5 year backlog. So we are, in theory, if you're ready to go, and you sign up for the program, we should be able to get you an estimate and move forward with materials this year if need be.
But to be clear, you need to see the damage in
Correct.
person. So you would
Yeah.
have to come out this year.
Yeah, so it's air. So there's a good chance that if you have documented damage from last year, assuming you're especially grower, if you have documented damage from last year, whether it's pictures or stuff of that nature, You can contact your area wildlife manager and see if that's good enough. They might require that you have physical damage this year. Um, an important thing to know is there is no threshold for damage. So if you start growing, you start planting this year and the first sign of a deer nibbling on a plant, that's damage. So the second that happens, you call your area manager and work on getting them out there. The second that they sign you up for the program, if you qualify, your name comes across my desk, and then I put you on our list. And so we do get to people as they are on the list. So if you join the list now, you're going to be on the bottom. However, you have my contact number. Once you get assigned, sign that agreement and you're waiting for assistance, if you reach out to me, that helps kind of move things faster. Because we do have to call people, and so a lot of it is just getting a hold of folks. But if you get a hold of me, that that kind of uh, escalates it a little bit.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's excellent. I think that it's important to remember sometimes people only speak to their own experience. So maybe 4 years ago, there was a 3-year wait list. And so they
Mhm.
just kind of say that like it's still currently true and it might not be true. So that's important to remember.
So when I started in 2022, we had over 100 people on our fencing list waiting for help. My coworker Franklin and I have been on the road for the last 2 years for like 3 or 4 days a week on honestly living out of hotels. And we got that list down to, like I said, there are 12 people on the list right now that are new from this last year. So we we were clearing, and I'm excited that we can finally start helping people the year they are having problems.
Yeah, that's excellent. Do you have any more questions, Ario?
No, I think that's awesome. And I really mean it, Brandon. I think the fencing it is so hard to get good help. So I really appreciate you guys putting in the work and especially being available to like the small farm community and the emerging farmer community. I think folks sometimes feel like they're maybe small potatoes compared to like the big growers. So it means a lot to have you guys actually showing up here and talking to everybody.
Nice. Well, we appreciate being invited to it.
Yeah, and I'll just put out there, I would love to, Annalise, we haven't talked about this, but when we do field days this coming year, I think another opportunity to get you guys out and talking to some of the growers. We'd love to kind of keep you abreast of what we've got going on and see if there's good opportunities to interact again, on the farms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think sometimes interacting with our state agencies can feel kind of overwhelming. This is a pretty small program in terms of number of people, and so it's kind of a direct contact model. So it's less confusing and sort of, you're not going to be passed between 10 different people with phone trees and all that. You kind of just call and that's it. So that's nice. Great. Well, thank you all. We will end it and hope that you have a wonderful day.